Greetings. Nice to see you, folks. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is another episode of How to Rock Astrology. Nice to see you. Today's episode, we are planning to discuss, in a continuation of our 27 Nakshatras series from various books, we're going to be reading about Uttara Phalguni today. We're going to get it from the source, from the Taittiriya Brahmana, and we're also going to hear a little extra details along the way, especially from an author who does a lot of research on the classical Vedas. So I'm excited to be hanging out here, folks. As usual, this is a live stream. Feel free to make some comments, say hello. Let me know what you're liking, what you're feeling, what you're doing, what you're into. I actually got to refind it here. And we shall get started. So, as usual in my series, what I often like to do is I'll start with a little bit of an introduction, just discussing the nature of this series. At the start of the beginning of this Nakshatra series, I have a video describing this 27 Nakshatra series. It goes into a lot of this stuff in a little bit more detail, but I still like to have an intro that talks about everything. For everybody watching, I am a tropical Vedic astrologer. In my personal practice, I use 12 tropical signs overlaid on the 27 star-based nakshatras. If you want to know the difference between tropical and sidereal, feel free to check out my series of videos. I did a good one on the Age of Aquarius Debunked. That gives a little bit more info on that. So this is what I always explain to give the guts of it. There was once a demon ego who was becoming bigger than the cosmos, or at least threatening to be. All the gods called on Vishnu, who is always the person they call on when things get the hairiest, because Vishnu is the dreamer of this cosmic dream. And Vishnu said, all right, I'll go to him, and I'll disguise myself as a midget, the size of an atom, and I'll ask him for a boon. So he goes to the demon of ego and says, can I have a boon, sir? I just need 3 footsteps, 3 paces of land. I ask from you. And the ego says, you are the size of an atom. You are the smallest thing possible. All you want is 3 footsteps? Fine, you can have them. And Vishnu said, great. With my first step, I'm going to take deep space of the stars. With my second step, I'm going to take up local space, which is the tropical zodiac. And then all that was left was the earth, which holds the ego. And the demon said, sir, I recognize that you are Vishnu, which is a cosmic force that is bigger and more powerful than my individuated self, my individuated sense of self. With your third step, you may step on my head. And that represents the geomantic space created by Earth, the houses, etc. So this kind of gives us a reckoning that very early on, the Vedic world, this story actually comes from Puranas, so it's not that old. But I think it's a clear indication of the 3 layers where tropical zodiac is different from the stars. That's, again, just explaining more of the sidereal tropical debate. So because the stars are different from the zodiac, and that the zodiac changes place amongst the stars every 24,000 years. It goes in a circle. So that's why in this series I intend to convey the pure essence or nature of these nakshatras as they are without the sign associations, without the Rashi associations. Now, in order to do so, we have to find some literature that was ideally created before the natal horoscope and the way things work in a horoscope are done. Because the sidereal tradition of India has always taken it that the nakshatras of the stars are married to the zodiac signs. We tropical astrologers know that the zodiac, because of the precession of the equinox, the zodiac positions change against the stars. So because the Indian people, who are that's where the originating source of the nakshatras is, they always assumed they were married. So in today's time, it's useful for us to try and extract that combined reading of the nakshatras from what the original essence of the nakshatras are and were before zodiac astrology, before the 12 signs came into play. The zodiac and this 12 signs came into play around 200 BC, 500 to 200 BC. But the nakshatras are much older than that. We have a text here that goes back 4,000 years to about 2,000, give or take 2000 BC. This is very old Vedic literature known as in particular, this that we're reading from is called the Taittiriya Brahmana. The Brahmanas are commentaries, and this one in particular is a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda, considered to be a continuation of its Vedic consciousness. This is mostly, again, Ernst, Wilhelm, Vic Dicara. Most guys in the tropical scene are looking at this book because it is, again, undistorted. Now, again, you can see the beginning video in the series for more on this, but this is just a reminder. The twofold distortion which the nakshatras have gone through, or that they could, when we read literature on the nakshatras, we have to watch for two things. Number one, let me see if you guys can see me okay. Yes, good. There's the zodiac association with a certain zodiac sign, and that's caused by the sidereal tropical debate. So, for example, most people think that Bharani is inherently stuck in Aries. That's the old-fashioned way of doing things. But Bharani in today's time, because the tropical astrology zodiac has shifted 23 degrees, Bharani now lands in Taurus. There are many examples of this kind of thing. Uttara Phalguni in the olden days, I believe, was considered, was probably still all in Virgo. But, Purva Phalguni was Leo and Virgo. Nowadays, it's just Virgo. It's sliding. So we are looking to get away from that distortion, where we're getting away from the idea that the signs are married, the zodiac is married to the nakshatras. We're getting away from that distortion. As well, there's something called the Vimshottari Lord. That's the planet that rules the first dasha period when the moon falls in that nakshatra. So this is, for example, in the case of Uttara Phalguni. If you are born with the moon in Uttara Phalguni, then the first Mahadasha, the first period that you experience, is going to be of the sun. So people think that since when the moon is in Uttara Phalguni, you experience the sun as your first period, and it's because everything that happens to you when you're 0 years old, especially from 0 to 1, which is the age of the moon, things get deeply baked into your consciousness. So if you're in the sun period during that time, you're going to have a sun energy. This is the idea of it. But what has been described is that Vimshottari was created. Vimshottari is the dasha system. If the moon is in Uttara Phalguni, you go through the sun dasha first, and then you go to the next one. This is an aspect of astrology that was created long after the original nakshatras were discovered. Again, the nakshatras were written about in their fullest in the Taittiriya Brahmana, which we're about to read from. That's like 4,000 years ago. Vimshottari and the dashas, they came into being about 2,000 years ago. So we can see why, if we're reading from literature that doesn't come from the originating point, it can get distorted by time. That's why we're reading the old stuff. Now, this is a depiction of where this nakshatra falls in today's time. I just want to check quickly that we're all good here. Yeah. These are two tropical ideas of where this nakshatra falls, and I'm still changing this. I'm still reckoning with this. I have to do a video at some point with Ernst and with Vic discussing the nature of these two ayanamshas and why they're so different, because you can see they make vast changes. For Vic uses the Lahiri ayanamsha, where each nakshatra is a set pattern of 13 degrees, 20 minutes of arc. And it's set the whole way down. Now, what's interesting you can see the difference between these two, because Vic's has a set pattern, whereas in Ernst's idea of this particular ayanamsha, the Dhruva equatorial longitude, the nakshatras get smaller or bigger. It's not a set pattern. As we can see here, 20 degrees, let's say 20 degrees Taurus. In an Ernst system, let's say Kritika is also at 20 degrees Taurus. Now for Vic, Magha falls at 24 degrees of Leo. But then for Ernst, halfway through, we can see Magha is not at 24 degrees. It's at about 16 degrees. So Ernst's hard to explain, but in Ernst's system, the nakshatras get wider halfway through the cycle, and then they get narrower as you go back to Kritika and Vishaka. So that's something I have to talk with those boys about once I have the time, and once they have the time to host that conversation with me. But in the modern system, how we would read it is that in Vic's system, Uttara Phalguni comes between 20 degrees and 47 minutes of Virgo, and it ends at 4 degrees of Libra. For Ernst, Uttara Phalguni begins at 14 degrees of Virgo and ends at about 29 degrees of Virgo. For me, it's difficult to figure out a planet if it's in both of these, because in today's time we don't know. Both of these men are authorities for tropical Vedic astrologers on what the nakshatras are all about. So we don't really know what's right. What I often say is that it's likely if a planet falls between both of them, then it's probably okay. For example, from 20 degrees of Virgo to about 29 degrees of Virgo. Let's say about 30 degrees of Virgo. You can be sure that this person probably has an Uttara Phalguni planet. After 29 degrees of Virgo, it's cuspy, and before about 20 degrees of Virgo, it gets cuspy. So take that what you will. Oh, shoot. Thank you, Monique Wells. Somebody has noticed that my picture went away. Okay, folks, I'm going to have to sign in and out in order to fix this. I'm going to see you guys in just one moment. If you're watching, feel free to hang out. I'm just going to be right back in order to fix this picture. Hello again, folks. If you guys can hear me okay, hopefully. Thank you so much to Monique Wells for giving me a text letting me know that my picture had gone away. I often can't see my screen while I'm doing this stuff. Thank you, Monique. Yeah, my computer, I think, is going through a bit of a thing right now. I'm going to have to give it a good clean. But, again, to reiterate here, as we can see, if a planet falls between 20 degrees Virgo and 29 degrees Virgo, it's probably for sure Uttara Phalguni. If it's in the cuspy places, then you might want to be careful with how you define it. And as Vic Dicara has given me the advice before, if you have a planet that's cuspy, if you're not exactly sure of its nakshatra placement, there are plenty of things in the astrology chart that you can be more sure of. Don't go, unless you're researching and you want to assume or play with the idea that you have this nakshatra for a while. You know, that's important work that we're all doing these days. That's why we're doing these videos, to help feel out the positions of where these nakshatras really fall. But if you're doing an astrology chart for somebody, you have their life in your hands. So don't go I guess I'm just going to roll with the idea that you have Uttara Phalguni as this important position as the moon, for example, when you're not entirely sure, and then give this person a whole idea of their destiny that is not true. That's one of the dangerous parts of astrology. And as Vic Dicara said, there's plenty of things that you can be sure of, or much more sure of, in an astrology chart than a cuspy nakshatra. So don't go too far into it. If you always take it with a grain of salt where these nakshatra positions are in this day and age until we figure out more clearly what's going on there, right? Hello, Teresa. Nice to see you. Hello, Toxica. Glad you guys are hanging out with us here. Okay, let's keep going forward, folks. Now, despite everything I've just said, every nakshatra has some classical nakshatra characteristics. This does not come from the Taittiriya Brahmana. Let me make that clear. Before we get to the Taittiriya Brahmana, I first want to describe the nature of these 4 characteristics. These are not given in that early 4,000-year-old text. So they might have come by cultural intuitions and commentaries based on the 2 distortion points we've already mentioned. I'm mentioning them here so that we can exercise each other in seeing the possibility that any of these nakshatra qualities might resonate with the themes that we hear from in reading about the old authentic literature. So keep it in mind when we read about the nakshatra energies here, that they might be subject to distortion. Now we have the activity, which is either active, passive, or balanced. We have the 7 qualities of the nakshatras. We have the sexual yoni animal. It's used in lunar compatibility, especially in marriage assessment in old ancient India. And then there's the kingdom, which Ernst Wilhelm gives special relevance to in his little book, in the intro to his Energies of the 27 Lunar Mansions, which is his commentary and translation on the Taittiriya Brahmana that we're going to be reading from. So, whoops. Here are all of the nakshatras that are grouped together under the Dhruva quality nakshatras. So it means fixed or permanent. And Vic Dicara has given us an important clue as to what exactly this fixed nature means. So I'm just going to quickly get into this little footnote that Vic Dicara has given us from the previous nakshatra, which is Purva Phalguni. What we read is that with large constellations that span 2 nakshatra segments, and there's a few of these, there's 3 in particular. I'm going to show a little something here. Let me see. This would be Ugra. I shall explain. Yeah, okay. With large constellations like the Phalgunis, right? There's Purva Phalguni, and then there's Uttara Phalguni. There's the early Phalguni, and then there's the later one. And right now we're doing Uttara, which is the later Phalguni. With large constellations that span 2 nakshatra segments, this first segment, which is Purva, is always going to be more masculine. And the second nakshatra, the Uttara nakshatra, in this case Uttara Phalguni, is more feminine. Being first, the Purva signifies being outgoing and inceptive, putting energy out there, initiating an interaction. And this is the masculine trait. Coming later, holding, receiving, is this signifies patience and endurance, attracting, magnetizing something to itself. These are the feminine traits. So accordingly, every nakshatra that's Purva, that begins of when talking about the large spanning nakshatras, every Purva nakshatra, the masculine one, has a manly ugra nature, which means power and force. And as we can see here, when we look at our Ugra Nakshatras, we have Purva Bhadrapada, Purva Phalguni, and Purva Ashadha. Right? And so this is the nature of them is fierce and severe. It's almost that masculine quality of the Purva Nakshatras, including Purva Phalguni. It's severe and fierce because it's masculine. It doesn't need to necessarily attract. It's more outgoing and getting through the resistance and endurance of life and its difficulties. It's more intelligent than attractive per se. That's the Purva stuff, including Purva Phalguni. Now we're talking about Uttara Phalguni, and this is the feminine side. So as we can see, Purva Phalguni is considered the fixed and permanent nature. So this is the Dhruva has more of a feminine nature, and Vic Dicara describes it as pertaining to patience and also long-standing endurance. It's a different type of endurance. The masculine endurance gets through a lot in an immediate moment. The Uttara, including Purva rather, Purva Phalguni and the Purva Nakshatras can get through things immediately, can deal with things as they are, and get through intense difficulty. The Uttara Phalguni and all the Uttara Nakshatras can sustain and endure a long-term haul with the patience of magnetizing a person, magnetizing a man in the classical Vedic ideology, as the feminine receives and attracts and can for a long time attract. Even while a man goes this way and this way and this way and this way, the woman is constantly long-term attracting the man. Eva M is asking, are your Moon-Venus vids for Vedic or Western? Eva M, just so that you know, I'm what's called a tropical Vedic astrologer. So Vedic is actually not a system of measurements. I think what you're asking is, are my Moon-Venus videos for sidereal or Western? Sidereal are the people who turn things back 23 degrees. So my moon videos, really it can work for anybody. If you have the moon in Taurus and Venus in Gemini, it's the same archetype, whether you turn the signs back 23 degrees or not. But I practice tropical. I do not turn the signs back 23 degrees, just to clarify. So this is the nature of the Uttara Nakshatras, as they have this long-term attracting, feminine, receiving energy, right? There's a fixed and permanent energy to them where they constantly are trying to bring out the same eternal soul, which is so typical of the feminine consciousness, which is internalizing. And when you internalize, you can perceive the nature of the transmigrating soul that has come from life to life to life to have some kind of earth experience. And the feminine is usually the type of consciousness that falls in love with the depth of a person's soul. So we see this very deep aspect of the receiving involved in any of the Uttara Nakshatras, but in particular Uttara Phalguni, because the Phalgunis are about marriage. They're about the intertwining of the masculine and feminine energy. In particular, the solar energy and the lunar energies of two different people. All of the nakshatras have an overarching story. It begins with Agni at Kritika. Agni sort of produces or is the precursor to the emergence of Brahma. Brahma gives birth to its children, and then since Brahma was the creator and the only aspect of creation in existence, Brahma wanted to have a love affair with its own daughter, its own creation, and that created the multiplicities of consciousness. And, Mrigashirsha is the deer that eventually, there's a whole thing where Prajalpati, which is Rohini, which is Brahma, wants to chase the deer, which is its own daughter. But Ardra, which is the Rudra Nakshatra of Shiva, which is Ardra Nakshatra, shoots an arrow through Rohini, and that's the deer's head thing. So there's a whole story there, and this leads up to the marriage. And there's a marriage that happens where the ox carts of the dowry, the feminine of Uttara Phalguni, the son's daughter, gets its dowries in Magha. Then it's taken to the Phalgunis, where the moon and the sun, the son's daughter, are wed and married and live in the Phalgunis. So the Phalgunis have led up to this very important part of the whole nakshatra consciousness, which is a tantric female and masculine energy exchange at a very personal and deep level that's metaphorical for all of us. The nakshatras being the feminine dimension of consciousness. The planets are the masculine conscious agents of Vishnu. The signs and the nakshatras are like the feminine, in a way, the embodied dimension. And as a part of the embodied dimension, it is the nakshatras are bound to involve itself with sexuality. There's 27 of them. 9 times 3 is 27. The 3 is what interplays the genders and the gender dynamics. And this is really cultivated strongly in the Phalguni Nakshatras. So, because it's a marriage nakshatra, the feminine dimension of Uttara Phalguni in particular really stands as the receiving energy that receives a man. And in fact, its energy relates to the kingdom of the Jiva animals. I'm looking at this and it looks like I've made a mistake. The Uttara Phalguni, I don't think I've got the correct. Damn, too bad. I don't think I have the correct yoni animal for the Uttara Phalguni here. And I don't know what that would be. I don't have my other book. Keep in mind, folks, it looks like I've made a mistake with the Uttara Phalguni Nakshatra, the yoni animal. I gotta fix that. Uttara yoni. But I digress. Uttara Phalguni. You'll notice that I've grouped this as these are all the fixed permanent dhruva, receptive feminine quality nakshatras. And I've grouped them further into Jiva, Dhatu, and Mula. Now, the kingdoms of the animals are very, very relevant. Again, Ernst Wilhelm gives specific mention to them in his commentary on the Nakshatra Sutras. He describes the animal nature as being very particularly one of the most relevant nakshatra attributes. How it actually goes in the chronology of the nakshatras is it goes, Jiva, Mula, Dhatu, Jiva, Mula, Dhatu, Jiva, Mula, Dhatu, all the way. Starting at Kritika, which I believe is Jiva. The next is, I think, Rohini, which is, I think, we've got it here, don't we? Rohini would be Dhatu, and then the next one would be Mula, and then the next one would be Jiva. So they kind of cycle through, just like the astrology signs in the 12-sign Zodiac also do. Ernst Wilhelm describes the nature of the 3 animal kingdoms in his new Rashi series, which you can find on his astrologyvideos.com website. He describes the Jiva, Mula, and Dhatu qualities, and in them he describes them through the modalities of the 12-sign Zodiac, where the cardinal signs are considered dhatu, which is mineral. The fixed signs are considered mula, which is plants. And then the mutable signs are considered jiva, which is animals and humans. And we can see there's an evolutionary intent in consciousness. The mineral people, dhatu, tend to just think purely of the material world, or at least, of course, this is the vessel for their consciousness doing what their consciousness wants to do. This isn't to say that a dhatu nakshatra person is going to be strictly materialistic. They use material for their soul ends. They're very focused on using the material world for whatever their soul ends are, described elsewhere in their chart. The plant people, mula, which is the fixed signs, Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, Leo. Remember, dhatu is the cardinal signs. That's Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Then mula, the plant, is the fixed signs. These people are in between. They tend to the fixed signs, who will hold something and merge it and allow it to kind of adapt a little bit. Although the adaptation more happens in the mutable level of reality. But the fixed signs are holding on to something. And in order to hold on to something, like mula, the plant consciousness, think of a building whose inside steel girders have a little bit of sway to them so that the building can sway in the wind. This is how the building stands and lasts long. This is the nature of the mula nakshatras and signs, which are the fixed signs. They remain integral, but they have this bit of sway. And that's why, just like the plants, the plant world is very bureaucratic, very democratic. They all the plants are like one entity in a way. When one plant dies, another plant is said to feel it in a certain way. So there's a universality in the plant consciousness. So the plants are an in-between from the mineral and the jiva. So those nakshatras are going to have that diplomatic, they're going to, they'll be good at, like, for example, maybe they'll own a business and they'll be aware of where their material comes from for their business. And they're focused on their business, and they'll look at the people, the animal kingdom, the world all around them, use a little bit of it, but mostly focus on their own business. Jiva are the ones who, and remember, Uttara Phalguni is a Jiva nakshatra. The Jiva nakshatras are the ones who are aware of humanity, aware of what other people are doing, aware of psychology. They're politicians. They're good at manipulating and changing the way things are and the way people think in order to extract an agenda. We can see with this being a Dhruva nakshatra, a fixed permanent energy inside of a nakshatra, the Dhruva feminine attracting energy uses jiva. It uses the animal kingdom. It uses the most intelligent, individuated consciousness to achieve its ends. So this is a feminine, again, this is somebody who's good at getting people together for the sake of, like somebody in business who's a real networking person, who understands through the feminine energy the nature of attracting people for specific ends, for some great purpose, for enjoyment typically, because that's what Uttara Phalguni is about. But enjoyment, but also wealth and abundance and good marital combinations, whether it's in business or whether it's in love. So we can see the energy of somebody with a lot of planets or with a native of Uttara Phalguni is going to have the ability to attract things that have an enduring basis for a relationship. And they know the psychodynamics of the jiva, which is the animal kingdom. They know how the humans work. They're not focusing all their energy making a business and then hoping to attract that way. They do their thing, but they have an intelligent sense of the nature of the person they're dealing with. And this is the very calculated, feminine dimension of Uttara Phalguni. It's like a plant or something that is attracting and seducing, and learning the psychodynamics of that thing and of what makes everybody attracted to somebody. So Uttara Phalguni, being this marriage nakshatra, is going to, we see in Indian marriages, the women of all these different things and jewels and beautiful dresses and all these classical aspects of beauty and youth that are universal to everybody. Marriage has this consciousness in it, and the Uttara Phalguni kind of expresses this in a way. Very cool. So that was a nice little rant. The next thing we're going to be getting into, again, everything we've just explained has been coming from classical Vedic literature that's not necessarily that old. Everything we just read about is probably 2,000 years old or so, maybe even in the medieval ages, from 0 AD to 1000 AD. It doesn't have the deep essence of the nakshatra in it. It's more extraneous literature, which is still cool. A lot of the times, most times when I read these qualities, I see them in the nakshatra. Even Vic Dicara mentions the dhruva quality of the nakshatra in his book that we're going to be reading from. But I digress. It's still important for us to remember that the next reading we're about to read is how you really get the essence of the nakshatra. And this is going to come from the Nakshatra Sutras of the Taittiriya Brahmana. And this is that text that I mentioned, which was very old. This is the Taittiriya Brahmana it's a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda, and it's Vedic era literature. So how do we read them? The sutras in the Taittiriya Brahmana, they have 8. Is it 8 or 6? 1, 2, 3. It's 6. So there's 6 slots where a word can go. The slots themselves have implications where, this is how these sutras work, is I often describe them as an iceberg, where you see the words and it's like the tip of an iceberg, but there's actually a deeper depth to the meaning of the words that we have to convey, partly through the nature of simply the words themselves, but also how they line up to make sense in the repeating motifal figuration of all these sutras. All of them have these 6 figures. There's the deity, which rules the nakshatra. There's the name of the nakshatra, and sometimes they'll use an obscure name to give more information. There's what is needed for that nakshatra to function properly, and that's expressed by the parastad. And then there's what the nakshatra desires to produce from what it receives, and that's the yajamana. That's the avastat word. And so we can see how the nakshatras are expressed in this way, where usually what will happen if the nakshatra is good, if there's good things happening in the nakshatra and it's emphasized in a person's chart, the nakshatra will receive what it gets, and what it produces will be harmonious with the universe and what that nakshatra desires to produce, and what it produces will help it to keep receiving what it desires to receive. If a nakshatra is not aligned, if the energy of the nakshatra, if the planets inside it have some affliction that's going to cause difficulty for this nakshatra, then the nakshatra will get what it needs to receive in a perverse way. It will still receive that thing, but it will be perverse, and it will produce perversion. It will produce mixed up and messed up attachments and desires from what it produces that only further obstruct the nakshatra getting what it receives. And it can be a devastating cycle to see it. So this is how these nakshatras kind of work. Now let's start getting into our first reading of the Uttara Phalguni Nakshatra Sutra. Now, again, I get these from both Ernst, Wilhelm, and Vic Dicara, but they essentially are reading it from the original Taittiriya Brahmana Sutras. I just want to check. Bhaga Uttara. Ah, yes, okay. Interesting. So, well, anyway, we'll get into translating it. But first, before we start, this is the tradition of what to do when you're discussing the Nakshatra Sutras, is to go through the actual sutra yourself, allow it to permeate your consciousness, and allow it to steep like steep tea inside of the teacup of your mind, so you can fully absorb, again, the iceberg that is underneath what we see on the surface, the iceberg of meaning. So this is the stotra. Again, I've learned this particular rhythm from Vic Dicara, and he describes it even better in his Nakshatra series on YouTube and on his website. But I still do my best because I enjoy to do it. Bhaga Uttara Vahatavaha Parastad Vahamana Vastat Bhaga Uttara Vahatavaha Parastad Vahamana Avastat. This is how the sutra goes. This is how the flow of it sounds and feels. Now let's get into our left brain and start analyzing and digging into the terms that we see here. Now, my first reading today is going to come from Ernst Wilhelm's Energies of the 27 Lunar Mansions. This is something that Ernst Wilhelm has produced for free for everybody's educational knowledge. God bless him for it. He's one of the earliest guys to have this text out there. As such, I don't think that it's as well worked out as the reading that we're going to do with Vic Dicara. But it's still important to read it because it's going at this from two different types of the brain, really. Ernst Wilhelm describes the sutra in a very brass way, where it's very literal. It almost doesn't seem to make sense because it's enigmatic. He shows you only the tip of the iceberg, and he doesn't paint the rest of it for you. Vic Dicara paints the rest of it for us, which is good, but it's still good to remember to really take things the way Ernst Wilhelm describes it here, as this steeping of these Sanskrit words in their very stark original essence. They're both good and they're both important, but I like to start with Ernst. And this is the way he defines all these words. Bhagasya, it means of Bhaga. Bhaga is the, let's just describe this a little bit real quick. Bhaga is the companion of Aryaman. Aryaman is the god, the Aditya deity of the previous nakshatra, which is Purva Phalguni. Aryaman is the masculine dude. Bhaga is the feminine dude. Still a dude. He's still an Aditya. He's one of the 12, I believe there is 9 or 12 Adityas that are classically ascribed to different times of the day in classical Vedic literature. I believe that there is 12 of them. I almost kind of just want to do a quick check. Adityas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Pretty much 12. Maybe Aditya doesn't count as one. So yeah, 12. Different ancient Vedic compendiums will define the Adityas in different ways. But they're typically a deity, a god. And Bhaga is the feminine aspect of the Phalgunis. So when we read here, we see that Bhaga is the dispenser. It means affection. It's the Aditya presiding over love and marriage. Not the initiation or contracts involved in the marriage, which is Aryaman, the masculine initiating principle, but the Bhaga is the fruit, the results, the affection, the love, the beauty that comes from the marriage when it's done right. Now, of course, Uttare means at the later, at the concluding. So Bhaghasyotare means that Bhagha comes after. That's the Uttara part of the Phalgunis, right? We have Vatavaha. You'll notice that since there's a little dot at the end of the H here, you produce a H sound at the end. Vahatavaha. And Vahatavaha means a strong carrying or a flow. So we have a strong carrying or flow from above, a strong flow from above. And then Vahamana means conveying wishes, flowing wishes. And that is, of course, the Avastat from below. So the reddishness, I don't know where this reddish is coming from. I feel like I'm missing a word in here. Purve Phalguni. So this is basically, the reddish is a definition for Phalguni. The Phalguni Nakshatras are considered to be red. There's a big red spot in the sky where the Phalgunis reside. There's a romantic metaphor here for the red being primal, being earthy, being the passion that is brought forth by two married people in their passion coming together for the sake of love and lust and all the things involved with that. So that's why the Phalgunis are considered reddish. So the Phalguni at the concluding Uttare of the Aditya Bhaga, the dispenser. So the later part of the red part of the sky, ruled by Bhaga, is a strong flow from above and flowing wishes from below. Bhaga, being the later part of the Phalgunis, the red, is a strong flow from above and strong carrying wishes and desires from below. The strong flow is what seeks to be received in order to produce fruit, desires, wishes, flowing wishes. So we see the female needs to have energy and things coming to it in order to fructify and produce better things from that intake. So this is painting a picture of the energy of the feminine, which takes the energy of something in the marriage dowry, and because from the wealth, from the ease produced by the man, the masculine energy that takes care of things brings in that protection, brings in the resources, whatever, not only from his family, but also from what he does in his life. The woman has less need to deal with things in life that are kind of beneath the feminine energy. The feminine energy does better taking the resources and making something complex, beautiful, and deep out of it. So this is the strong flow from above produces the wishes for the whole family, for the husband, for the children, for everybody around the woman. When a woman is in flow with love energy and what she needs, she can have the ability to produce the great things that women produce for a family inside of a strong family unit. Eva seems to be asking, is it on his site? I wonder if you mean Vic Dicara's website. To clarify, Eva, much of the stuff that I get for these pictures, including the next slides we're going to see, this is describing more of the nakshatra here. These come from Vic Dicara's Nakshatras course on his website, and I do highly recommend it. VicDicara.com is where you can find that. This free little notebook from Ernst Wilhelm, as I've described. Gotcha. Thank you, Eva, for clarifying. This little book, it's actually something I've just put together with like string. I hole punched it and made this little book. I don't know. I went to Staples or something like that, some place that allows you to make these things. But essentially, it was a PDF that I had to print. I printed the whole thing. I cut the pages to size. But you can get this PDF as like almost like an ebook type thing for free on Google. Just look up Ernst Wilhelm, Energies of the 27 Lunar Mansions, and you should be able to find it. And I hope that's clarifying for you, Eva. So that is where we can get Ernst's conveying of things. Now, Ernst notes in this part of the book his perspective that different texts interchange the deities of this nakshatra in the previous because they're actually the same and represent the same cosmic function. So Purve Phalguni is the earlier part of this nakshatra, and this Uttara Phalguni is the late part. We're going to see, essentially, there's, I've made a video on talking about Aryaman and Bhaga, and this describes the old switcheroo that happened at the time when, essentially it's in later literature, that the nakshatra deities are switched. Some people say Aryaman is the energy of Uttara, the later Phalguni, and that Bhaga is the early one, and that they're switched. But this is how the Taittiriya Brahmana conveys it, that Aryaman is the initiator and Bhaga is the feminine receiver in the Uttara Phalguni. This is the main line of thought here, is that we're going with the Vedic authority that has been provided for us. That's how we have been doing it. And Vic Dicara goes on to describe the reason for this, which is, again, Aryaman, the masculine, is in the Purva, which is the initiator of energy. Now we're talking about Uttara Phalguni, where Bhaga is, which is the god of wealth and the producing of abundance that comes from the interaction of marriage, the feminine, right? Now, again, these translations come from Vic Dicara's Nakshatras course on his website, and I highly recommend it for anybody interested. We read that Bhaga, of course, there's the Yotare, which is just the Sanskrit way of combining Bhaga or Bhagasya with Uttare. When you combine them together, you get Bhagasyotare, and that means, again, the later part of the Phalgunis. So Bhaga means enjoyable things, and it means the beautiful female. Vahatavaha is the weight carrier, a plow puller, or a bull, essentially the masculine. And Vahamana is a desire carrier. So when Uttara Phalguni receives the energy from the weight carrier, the plow puller, the bull, some kind of intense devotional energy from something coming towards it, the Vahamana is created. The desires of both are carried through that energy. The masculine brings that plow-pulling energy. The feminine perpetuates the desires of both, using the momentum created by the masculine energy. It's important for me to bring something up here. Let's see if I can find it. There is a part of this consciousness that is worth mentioning. Gosh, I gotta find it. So what's great about Vic Dicara's book is that he has this very cool, very educational and enlightening section at the end of the book called The True Story of the Nakshatra Gods. And he brings much awareness of the nature of the nakshatras through this little extra section in the book. And what he mentions is that Bhaga, so all the Adityas used to rule different parts of the sky as the sun descends over the western horizon. So it's like the Adityas represent the sun going perceivably from Earth's perspective around the Earth. Bhaga rules the sky as the sun descends to the western horizon. This is the time of day when work is over and is done. And so we set our minds towards relaxation and enjoyment. We've done the first part of the day. Now we get to embrace and enjoy the fruits of the work that we've put in and the energy that we've received from the day. Bhaga means attractive and enjoyable things and refers to everything from money to power to beauty to sex to the vulva itself. Now, the deity Bhaga is a brother and very close friend to both Mitra and Aryaman. Mitra is, I believe, the deity which revolves around Anuradha. And Anuradha, let me just check. Yep. Mitra is ruled by, Mitra, the deity, rules the Anuradha Nakshatra, and that is about love. So since Mitra, Aryaman, and Bhaga are all deep, close brothers, this shows that the enjoyment of Bhaga is always paired with love, Mitra, and it requires mutual agreement, Aryaman, that's the Purva Phalguni, the masculine inception principle. Enjoyment is always paired with love and requires mutual agreement between the enjoyer and the enjoyed. Very interesting, right? Sorry about that. I think that I'm starting to figure out how exactly this stuff works one day at a time here. So, sorry about getting lost there. What we were just talking about was that enjoyment, these nakshatras, Purva, the deities of Purva Phalguni, Uttara Phalguni, and Anuradha. These are all close brothers, and it shows that there's a relationship between them. Bhaga of Uttara Phalguni is enjoyment. Mitra of Anuradha is love, and agreement of Purva Phalguni, of Aryaman. All three of these things are necessary in order for the enjoyment of love to be produced. Now, Bhaga was once punished violently by Rudra, that's Shiva, as part of the clash between the archetype of the renunciate of Shiva and the archetypal sensualist, Daksha, which relates with Bhaga. This punishment shows the principle that conventional pleasures should not be allowed to encroach upon spiritual principles, which is very interesting. Tantra has a way of including material enjoyment inside of its spirituality, but there are times when we do have to watch that this doesn't encroach into the sacredness of the non-mundane. of the transcendental. So, we are coming back to the idea of Bhaga as the one who receives the plow puller's momentum in order to produce sustainable desires for both. The beautiful woman in the later part of the fruit giver, which is Phalguni, needs a strong bull to support her dreams. This blue definition, again, comes from Vic Dicara's website. Now, the later one is what is actually coming from Vic Dicara's book, which we're about to read. This is coming from Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology, and you can see it here. Achieving, let's get this definition here. Achieving the beautiful woman requires strength and wealth in order to be wish-fulfilling. This is what's needed in order to achieve Bhaga, the beautiful woman, right? And we're going to get into this now in a little bit more detail, again, through Vic's book, Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology. Now, let's start getting into this. Vic Dicara's book is going to go through some deeper meanings of all the words inside the sutra, and then as well we're going to read a total summary, and then we're going to get into some interpretive side of how to interpret the nature of this sutra in the context of planets inside of falling into this nakshatra. Now, before we start, I'm just going to go to the bathroom really quick, folks. Nature calls when it calls. I'm going to be right back, and then we're going to continue with our reading on Uttara Phalguni. So, let's start getting into our more specific rendering of what's meant by this Nakshatra Sutra. The word Bhaga refers to all prized, valued, and treasured entities. The word denotes females and the female sex organ, and this is a fact reflecting how true Vedic culture prized and respected the feminine for what it is, what it represents. Now, our next word in here is Vahatavaha. We know Bhaga is the prized feminine. Now, Vahatavaha is the parastat. It's what's needed. This word indicates things that help us get to our objectives and achieve our goals. For example, it can refer to cars and carriages, or to bulls and oxen, which carry plows and help the land progress in producing its harvest, its fruits. Vahatavaha also refers to the items of wealth that a bride would take with her into a new marriage, because these items carry the bride from her previous living situation and help establish her new living situation. It's interesting that the feminine dowry is considered part of this Vahatavaha. It almost shows this idea that it's what a woman has to attract the man that allows her to produce the combination of herself with the man, which is the Vahamana, the flow. It's almost as if her own family flow, her own resources, her own mind, her own soul, her own emotional energy, her own personality, these are part of her dowry, including the wealth that her family has. And it's the dowry, it's what she has, all of what she is and has, that she uses to attract the combination of herself with a man. Very interesting. Now, the Vahamana, as we've read, it means fulfillment of the objectives and goals themselves. So let's read into what exactly Vic finalizes about this. Vic's summary of this nakshatra is that the previous nakshatra, which is Purva Phalguni, concerns our ability to initiate romantic exchanges. Purva Phalguni initiates them. Now this current nakshatra, which is Uttara Phalguni, concerns our ability to solidify these romantic exchanges into long-term unions and thus derive their fruits and to get the most out of them. The previous nakshatra described how a man should approach a woman to evoke her creative and fertile energies. The current nakshatra describes how a woman utilizes the strength and resources of a man to generate a blissful and wish-fulfilling union. The woman uses her own resources and the man's resources, and the combination of the two of them together as the plate, as the material, as the tissue from which she generates the life that they both want to live. Now, the physical strength of a friendly and affectionate male provides a woman practical protection, that's one meaning of vahatvaha, from other men. Because all women will be sought after in some way by men. But once she's married and once everyone knows that she's taken, then the pressure is off of her of dealing with all that. If this man ensures the woman is safe and supplied with resources and raw material, which is the other meaning of vahatvaha, then she can apply her natural talents to these, producing fruits that make herself and everyone around her prosperous and happy. A woman without this type of support, however, has to face the harsh distress of basic survival on her own, which she could. Any woman can. The fact that what Vedic astrology wisdom is conveying to us here is that if she doesn't have to, she can have the prosperity and happiness is much easier for her to attain, which makes sense if she doesn't have to deal with all the other basic annoying aspects of reality, of getting away from men who are chasing her, all of these sorts of things. It's going to be easier for her to produce what she really wants. Without this support and having to face the harsh distress of basic survival on her own, this curtails her ability to be happy and make others happy, and thus neither she nor her partners will truly flourish. And this is partly why the Vedas will often say, Vic gives this to us in a little footnote. He says, it's written in the Vedas that the home in which a woman cries falls to ruin. The home in which a woman smiles will prosper. To provide women with the safety and resources that they desire is the key to felicity and prosperity. Beautiful. Great little note from Vic there, showing us the beautiful potential of the feminine consciousness. So, we've just talked an awful lot about the general philosophy of Uttara Phalguni. Now we're going to look at the interpretive information that we can get when we consider that any planet is falling inside of Uttara Phalguni. This is going to give us an idea of how to deal with it. And essentially, the main thing that Vic gives us is that Uttara Phalguni is a very welcome nakshatra for partnership, marriage, fidelity, romance, and creativity. But it's weak with things that require self-sufficiency and independence. So we read that most planets can actually fare well with this quite fortunate nakshatra. The softer and more feminine planets tend to do particularly well, especially Venus and the Moon. The harder or more masculine planets, the harder or more masculine planets like Saturn or the Sun have to be read with more sensitivity to other factors. They may indicate having the strength and resources required, or they may indicate being uncooperative and insensitive to the needs of partners. Mars in particular is a challenging planet in this nakshatra, since this nakshatra signifies partnership, but Mars is the planet of individuality. Very interesting. It definitely makes sense to me. I myself actually have Venus falling into Uttara Phalguni in the tropical position of the end of my Venus is about 27 degrees of Virgo in tropical astrology, and it falls into Uttara Phalguni. It is my Atmakaraka, so I do believe that I really carry on the nature of this energy in a strong way. It's something very interesting to me that, I'll probably be talking about that kind of stuff. If your Atmakaraka falls into this nakshatra, the nature of it is going to be served by the nakshatra, but it's also going to go through the sign energy as well. So it's interesting to think about. We see that Venus and the Moon, being these more receptive planets especially, are going to do well with the nature of understanding the feminine consciousness of Bhaga, of the desire to produce good fruits through a fruitful union with somebody else, with another partner, or with any partners of any sort, including business partners. So these feminine planets are understanding of the nature of partnership, marriage, fidelity, romance, and mutual creativity with another person. It makes sense that Saturn or Sun falling into Uttara Phalguni can be a little tougher, and if there is strength there, if there is no afflictions to the Sun or Saturn, then they might have the strength and resources required to make a fruitful union and to be an important player in any kind of union. If we have a woman who has the Sun or Saturn falling into Uttara Phalguni, and they are well placed for whatever reason, there's no afflictions, there's delight from their friends, then such a woman would find herself being able to push for the type of marriage she wants to have, the type of partner she wants to have, and instigating it and, creating that reality, especially through whatever house lord that planet represents. If you have a Cancer rising woman, and that would make the 7th and 8th lord Saturn. Saturn would rule the 7th cusp of Capricorn. It would also rule the 8th house of Aquarius. So if we have a woman with Cancer rising, where Saturn is falling into Uttara Phalguni, we see that there's a lot of intention of marriage and mutual investment being put towards that Saturn in Uttara Phalguni. So this is a person who probably would work very hard for the investments that she builds together with another person, and have some kind of monetary Saturn-based, hard work that she endures and puts in order to have value as part of her dowry, as part of what she can use to attract a man who would enjoy that type of value, which she would attract because that's her 7th lord, right? Very deep read there. if we had a same woman with a Saturn who was not well placed in Virgo, it's got enemies around it, it's got some kind of afflictions going into Uttara Phalguni, then that Saturn would probably be a dry thing. You know, I've developed all these resources and I want to use them in my marriage in this way because I deserve it, because I'm the one who did it. I'm the one who put all this energy in. It's taken my whole life savings. It's been so difficult to get these resources and these values and these strengths that I have. Now a man who takes that on is going to have to deal with the affliction involved with that Saturn, whatever it is. You know, if Mars is afflicting that Saturn, this is a Saturn that's tireless and doesn't know how to rest. And a man has to, a partner of that person has to deal with that affliction in the enjoyment of their marriage, which is Uttara Phalguni. Right? Again, lots of deep reads. I always like to, there's so much you can do with these interpretive things. Something I often like to read into as well is the Rahu and Ketu falling into the nakshatra. In the case of Ketu, Ketu is almost considered to be another Lagna. It's considered to be almost like a rising sign point. It's the soul path, the past life energy of a person that they've been in and stewing in for a long time. So a person with Ketu in Uttara Phalguni is probably trying to master the consciousness of marriage and of partnership and of creating happy unions. And how Ketu often works is because this is a territory that you're ultimately deeply trying to master, because it's the self. Because we've spent so much time in it, there's a mist around Ketu. And so we tend to assume that we have our Ketu nakshatra and sign mastered. Someone with Ketu in Uttara Phalguni will probably think or feel or really feel the importance of having the perfect marriage and it coming together, and they may think that they're a mastermind of how to produce the ultimate fruit out of it, that they know what their husband likes and how to use their husband to their best effect. Or if you're a guy, if you have an idea of the kind of interchange of resources and emotional energy that you want in a relationship, and then when you finally get there, you find that it's different from what you expected, and your expectations of it are going to always have to get knocked loose. If Ketu's Lord in its sign, is well placed and it has what it needs to function properly in the chart, then through that function, this lesson of Ketu will go well, and you will learn to master what it is to become married and entwined with the opposite gender energy. So that's, for example, in this case, somebody with Ketu, let's take the example of somebody in today's time. I know it's possible people 4,000 years from now might be watching this video. So in today's time, for those watching 4,000 years from now, Uttara Phalguni mostly falls into the tropical sign of Virgo. So if somebody has Ketu in Uttara Phalguni and that Ketu falls in Virgo, that means the presence, wherever Mercury is placed, is going to show how they carefully, playfully apply themselves to the agenda of Ketu in Uttara Phalguni. They might be playful about how to expand their world and knowledge and understanding of how they can harmonize and relate better with their partner. Harmonizing and relating with and expanding on a marriage, this is the consciousness of Uttara Phalguni and of Ketu in Uttara Phalguni. Learning to master that, not be too obsessed with it. Because even for everybody, marriage really is just one aspect of life. It's an important one. It takes up 2 nakshatras, and there's this whole nakshatra narrative leading up to the marriage. Marriage is a very key part of Indian culture and spirituality. But once you're married, it's not the be-all, end-all of reality. It's just another aspect of reality. You've got your spirituality beyond that. You've got your dharma beyond that. The marriage sometimes is the dharma in the ashram, but the man and the woman, once they're doing that aspect of their dharma, there's other aspects of your dharma that you got to deal with. Most people recognize this. They get married and they go along with life. Somebody with Ketu and Uttara Phalguni is a little over obsessed with this dimension of marital happiness, marital enjoyment. So they need to be able to exist and to let the energies of marriage find equilibrium and even be a little bit compulsive and obsessed with it sometimes. That's part of your nature. It's part of your evolutionary path. But in the end, once your Ketu matures, you'll probably find harmony and love with your marriage, and you'll get the exact amount of enjoyment that you need out of it if Ketu is well placed. If the Lord of Ketu has no afflictions and has what it needs to find a functional balance in its agenda. If the Ketu in Uttara Phalguni person does not have that, they will be over-obsessed with happiness in their marriage. Their marriage might be fine, but they're making mountains out of molehills. They're magnifying problems that don't actually mean that much to them, but they think it's important because Ketu is trying to liberate itself through this area. So they'll over-obsess about it. And they should be careful for that kind of over-obsession with interplays between themselves, feeling valuable in a marriage. This is the feminine dimension. So this person might be overly obsessed, whether a woman or a man, overly obsessed with trying to enjoy the pleasures between themselves and their partner, and might even get jealous, might even hope that, might feel insecure about being valuable enough to their partner. Whereas the partner's like, honey, I got it. It's fine. Again, it's always possible that jealousy interplays can happen with a person with Ketu and Uttara Phalguni because they think they know how to deal marriage. They think they're masters at it. And then they get married to a person, they think this is just so natural and easy. And when they're married to the person, they don't realize that there's things that they didn't think about, that they overlooked. So now they're 10 years into their marriage and they're worried that they rushed into it. This is Ketu and Uttara Phalguni. They rushed into their marriage because it felt so karmic to just get it all tied up. And now they find themselves being married to someone and they don't know if it's the right thing. They're obsessed with whether they make the right decision or not. And they might have to just live with their decision, and that's part of the liberation of Ketu and Uttara Phalguni. They might also have to deal with not having made the right decision. I can't tell you because I can't see what your Mercury looks like in your chart or whatever planet is going to be ruling Uttara Phalguni 4,000 years from now. But I hope that that's useful in understanding and seeing for yourself some things that you might be going through with this position. Now, Rahu in Uttara Phalguni is going to have similar things going on. A little bit different, but a little bit similar. Essentially, whatever's going on with your Ketu, wherever that's positioned, that's a necessary past life energy. And whatever that will be will probably, especially early in life, take you away from experiencing what marriage is all about. If you've got Rahu and Uttara Phalguni, you'll probably desire through whatever is happening with the opposite placement, you'll desire to move into the experience of a well-harmonized, balanced relationship with another person. It's the marriage, it's experiencing the conjugal archetype of sharing your life with the opposite sex, with a partner, or with the same sex, whatever you're into. Even LGBTQ plus people can engage in this nakshatra, obviously. So the engagement with a partner, the idea of that, reckoning with that, is going to make you realize, A, the intensity of that world for you, and B, it's going to help you master whatever's going on with Ketu. It's going to make you realize that you don't have Ketu mastered wherever it is in the opposite part of the zodiac, whatever nakshatra it's in. Could be in 2 different nakshatras, and I haven't worked out what those 2 are at the present time. But I'm just rolling with my thoughts here. Rahu in Uttara Phalguni is going to find a necessary dharma, a necessary karmic energy coming from the idea of sharing your life and resources and ideas and energies and investments in time with another person. Making the most out of that could be something that feels very difficult. This could be a very satisfying dharma for a woman who has this well placed. Rahu, because of the hungry nature of it, everyone's got it somewhere. And this is Uttara Phalguni is as Vic Dicara has described it, it's what did he say? It's a fortunate nakshatra, with, reared with themes of marriage, fidelity, romance, and creativity. And someone with Rahu here is really going to deeply want to experience all those things. So especially if the Lord of Rahu is well placed and there's no afflictions to the sign that this is falling into, in today's time that would be again Virgo and its Lord Mercury. But regardless, if things are going well with Rahu in its nakshatra and sign, then this is a person who instinctively has the deep desire to fully engage with all of these positive aspects of a marriage, to richly and deeply enjoy them in a tantric way. Spiritual people who find themselves, this is almost like an Osho consciousness. I would almost wonder if Osho had any placements here, although there's lots of tantric placements amongst the nakshatras. This one is mostly about marriage and the enjoyment of a long-term relationship that is dealt with through binding contracts such as a marriage agreement. And again, it's tantric. This is a person with Rahu in Uttara Phalguni who could have a deep desire to enjoy conjugal bliss, but also really the feeling of having gone years with the same person and the two of you found ways to make it enjoyable the whole time. This can be a good, classic, real, passionate marriage between two people who somehow found a way to stick together and make it enjoyable between the two of each other. That is the ideal situation. The nature of Rahu is malefic, so most times it won't really happen that way. Especially early on for a person with Rahu and Uttara Phalguni, there will be an obsession with making things honky-dory and harmonious and balanced. And again, what this means is that they'll be making a mountain out of a molehill. A molehill, it's just a tiny little thing, or an anthill. The person sees a mountain. This is this huge problem that we can't communicate about this. It's a huge, terrible thing where it's, any problems that happen in your marriage are something that you want to deal with and work through with your partner. But you don't want to over-obsess and make problems that aren't there. This can be Rahu in Uttara Phalguni. In particular, it has to do with how we enjoy our mutual resources together. What are the things that we're going to invest in? And what are the things that are needed by both partners in order to have an enjoyable experience after working, for example? What are the fruits that can come from our mutual investing in things? Usually this is more of a love enjoyment energy. That's Uttara Phalguni. So it's like, how are we enjoying our time off? Someone with Uttara Phalguni might put a big emphasis on, okay, honey, you've come home from work. Now let's enjoy our time together with our family, or let's go on a vacation. Let's go on a date. We'll have the kids, we'll get a babysitter, we'll go on date night, and we'll have that experience. It could be exhausting for anybody who has a partner with Rahu and Uttara Phalguni, but always remember that any partner you get is going to have Rahu somewhere, and they're going to exhaust you some way. And you have your Rahu somewhere, and you're exhausting your partner in some way. So for a partner to have Rahu and Uttara Phalguni, and they're exhausting you by going out and doing fun things together and enjoying the conjugal bliss of your relationship, there are worse ways to be exhausted. So this is a positive dimension of having Rahu or Ketu in this fortunate nakshatra. Ketu would probably be tougher. Rahu can get great enjoyment, again, especially for a woman with Rahu and Uttara Phalguni. But when things go awry, when Rahu is in Uttara Phalguni and its sign lord, which is, again, the lord of the tropical zodiac sign that Rahu falls into. In this case, in today's time, that would be Mercury and Virgo. If Mercury is not well, if Virgo is not well, for some reason, if there's afflictions to either of these, then Rahu will not be able to use its lord to functionally apply its agenda well. And such a person would be over-obsessed with the marriage things, with the happiness. They can't communicate and align the balance between work life and conjugal bliss, and their life is getting sapped away from them. Their whole soul purpose is disappearing because the partner that they got is not communicating about how to make space for the enjoyment that they seek. Right? So that is Rahu and Ketu in Uttara Phalguni. I'm glad I got to talk about it, and I love talking about Rahu and the nakshatras. I think I'm getting better at it. Let me know if you guys agree. I'm curious. Our friend Toxica has Sun and Ascendant in Uttara Phalguni. It's always hard to say whether you've got good placements here, Toxica. It takes a whole astrological reading to really see. Marriage is very deeply embedded into the 7th house, the 4th house, and the 9th house. So any afflictions to any of these is going to be involved with placements in Uttara Phalguni, right? We can't ever take anything just from one cookbook reading. Astrology is very systemic, and that's something to remember when we're listening to the themes of any nakshatra. Nice to see you, Teresa, as well. You have your Mars here, and Mars is your Darakaraka. Very interesting, Teresa. As we continue on, there's always so many different ways to interpret all the planets here. If anybody ever wants a reading from me, you can reach me at astrology@dustincormier.net to get into some of those nitty-grittier details, if you should feel like it. So that was cool. I enjoyed that. Now we're going to get on to the next thing, which is our life lesson from this nakshatra. In his book, Nakshatra, The Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, Vic Dicara does a great job of describing life lessons that come from the overall consciousness of the nakshatra in question. All these nakshatras have a philosophical depth of meaning and flow to them. And so Vic gives us these life lessons to get an overall understanding and depiction of the essence of the nakshatra. How nice. Magda's World is somebody who has said that your husband has Rahu in the 12th house in Uttara Ashada, and you've just celebrated your 25th anniversary. How lovely. I hope that that's been bringing you and him some of the bliss that you guys, I bet you deserve. How sweet of you to make that comment, Magda. Thank you, Teresa. I'm glad you're enjoying things. So let's get into our life lesson for this nakshatra. Again, this is from Vic Dicara, the life lesson of the meaning of Uttara Phalguni. As Purva Phalguni taught us what it meant to be a real man. Uttara Phalguni teaches us what it means to be an ideal woman. The sutra reveals that an ideal woman fulfills the desires of her partners. That's the spouse, the children, the friends, and etc. At first, this seems like a feminist's nightmare. The sutra also explains that a woman automatically makes others happy when she herself is happy and secure, as a result of having sufficient resources and security. That's the main thing that this sutra is conveying. And it probably does well for us to consider that planets and afflictions in Uttara Phalguni might also show a difficulty in finding sufficiency when one is partnered with a partner. A person might even surrender and sacrifice much of their enjoyment and self-sufficiency for the sake of the partner if things are not going well in this nakshatra. The sutra does not portray ideal women as objects of enjoyment who exist merely for the pleasure of others. Rather, it describes women as subjects who naturally produce pleasure for everyone when they are valued and given the resources that they need. Women naturally bring enjoyment and fulfillment to others when they themselves are happy and fulfilled. It's so obvious, but it's just so beautiful the way Vic puts some of these things sometimes. Now, this may not satisfy some versions of extreme or hardcore feminist worldviews who insist on denying the absence of any manly quality in women, but at least in my and Vic's opinion, this reveals a flaw in those worldviews, not in this beautiful, practical, and very realistic Vedic concept. Denying the absence of any manly quality in women. That is a thick paragraph there. I'm going to keep going to just keep on rolling with where we're at here, folks. The sutra, this Nakshatra Sutra, delivers an important life lesson to men as well. Men often complain, vocally or to themselves, that they have to work to supply resources for a woman. And this is like a hand complaining that it needs to carry food to the mouth. The sutra explains that resources and concessions given to a good female partner will ultimately do nothing but benefit the man as well as the woman. Therefore, it is in no one's best interest to deny security and resources to women. It is always better. You know, it might feel it takes a little bit of energy to lift your hand and go and eat that food, but you're going to get more energy, more sustenance, more vitality in the long run if you take that little bit of extra energy to get, you put in 1 ounce of energy and you get a pound of vitality. This is like what happens when we feed crops. We put in this little bit of water, this little bit of nutrients, and for 1 ounce of energy, we get a pound of fruit. It's the same thing for the cultivation of security and resources for women. When they are receiving what they need in order to be their best, then they get to be their best. And their best is more energetically what's the word? There's an exponential increase in vitality for everyone involved when a woman receives what she needs, which is a magical, powerful thing. And it's nothing but plus, And that's part of what this, I think what Vic is saying here is that there is this ultimately good thing that comes when women have what they need. Now, we have one last little part of our reading here, and it's known as the supplication. This is a little bit of writing that comes from Vedic literature. I believe it actually comes from different parts of the Taittiriya Brahmana, which is, the Taittiriya Brahmana is not just those Nakshatra Sutras, it's also further commentaries that's just a whole bunch of things talking about it all. And this is one of the bits that refers to Bhaga and Uttara Phalguni. Among the gods, you enjoy the greatest share of pleasure, Bhaga. You are the true experiencer of Phalguni's wealth. Grant us ability to parent and protect, and give full youthfulness, virility, and vitality to our senses and libido. Bhaga is the creative inseminator, entered into the vulva of the fruit-bearing goddess Phalguni. May we see the glorious child born. Let us also be like these two divinities. Beautiful. Gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Gotta love a little bit of Vic Dicara. Really puts things in a way that I've really never heard anybody else put them. So, I've just noticed something interesting. I'm going to have to check this out at some point. But nonetheless, we are here. We have one last reading to go, folks. This is going to be the final reading today. This is coming from the divine forces of the Lunar Nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas. If you want to read a little bit more about Bhaga and Aryaman, which is the deity of the previous nakshatra of Purva Phalguni, I've got a video talking about Aryaman and Bhaga available in my series referring to this book. This is going to take a little bit from this book in order to read into a little bit the nature of the native who has the energy of Uttara Phalguni. And this could come from different ways. This could come from somebody having the moon or the ascendant in this nakshatra, as well as any bunch of planets. Now, the caveat we have to give is that the author of this book is named Radhe, and she is a sidereal practitioner. So I'm often trying to, there will be things that I pull out of this reading because it could be a sidereal reckoning. It's always good for us to mention this in order that we can, again, in today's day and age, take this reading from an astrologer who has made possibly distorted associations with the nakshatra, still read what they think about the native. See if we can glean the wheat from the chaff and see something of the essential essence and nature of the nakshatra in question. Ultimately, she's a very good researcher, and much of the things she says will often be coming from the character of the Aditya, of the deity, from Vedic literature and what they mean to Vedic literature. Now, this is the same reading because in this book, the author has combined the Phalgunis. So in this reading, we're actually talking about Aryaman and Bhaga. And so this is a native who has any combinations of planets, an important ascendant or moon in Purva Phalguni or Uttara Phalguni. And she does get specific with them in the end. So let's read on a little bit here. Aryaman and Bhaga, ruling devatas for the Phalgunis, have many common roles and responsibilities. And this is also the case for people who are Purva and Uttara Phalguni natives. The Phalgunis are foremost noted as the marriage nakshatras of Surya and Soma. That's the daughter of the sun and King Moon, whose wedding ceremony is no doubt the most glitzy celebration in the history of Vedic literature. Surya's fashionable, jewel-bedecked bridal gown, the Ashwini Kumaras' ornate bridal carriage, and a wedding procession comprised of the most elevated gods. All of these indicate the festive occasions that are part and parcel of this native's life, making events, parties, a big thing. The native's role in such celebratory occasions spans a wide range of possibilities, depending upon the Phalguni planet and terrain of the chart. The native may plan such events, such as the case of Mercury or Saturn being amongst the Phalgunis. They may be responsible for the theatrical productions of the event, this is having Venus in the Phalgunis. Or the person may be a musician, having Venus or the moon in the Phalgunis. I'd like to say to everybody that, again, Venus is my Atmakarak and it falls in Uttara Phalguni. And I do love music. I'm a musician. I'm in a band. If you want to check my single, I've got it on my website. But I think it's cool that this says that a musician might find Venus amongst the Phalgunis, and I have that. Now, the person may be a performer, and that's if they have Mercury or the moon amongst the Phalgunis. Or they might be a master of ceremonies, and that is the sun amongst the Phalgunis. Now, of course, just about any well-conditioned Phalguni planet involved in auspicious yogas may implicate the native as the star attraction, doted upon by all attendees. This might be a soul-bound experience, because that's what the cosmic narrative of the daughter of the sun and the moon coming together in this marriage is something that permeates all human consciousness. We are that marriage in ourselves. So feeling like the star of that marriage is something that the Phalgunis might experience. You know, anybody with intense emphasis here might feel that them and their partner are doted upon by the cosmos. The cosmos adores this relationship of theirs, which can be pompous, but still can be beautiful. Again, if there's no afflictions, then this will go tantrically. There will be celebrations of this good thing, and there won't necessarily be attachment to it, but that doesn't mean that it can't be enjoyed. There's also no attachment to not enjoying it. How outrageous and pompous these festivities are also depends on the nature and condition of the planet, right? Teresa has asked, the fact that we're looking at tropical placements, but we're talking about sidereal nakshatras. Teresa, because they're sidereal nakshatras, they're in the same place that's configured familiarly with Lahiri-Ayanamsha, but it's got tropical placements on top of it. Just to give a quick little review here, we have a page here that kind of shows the placements involved in this. So these are tropical placements for the nakshatras from Vic Dicara and Ernst Wilhelm. What I've conveyed is that generally between 20 degrees of Virgo and 29 degrees of Virgo, a person has probably got their planet in Uttara Phalguni. Anything less than 20 degrees or anything more than 29 degrees of Virgo is probably a little bit cuspy, as we can see here. I hope that that's clarifying to your question there, Teresa. We are looking at sidereal nakshatras using tropical measurements. Now, excuse me, the combined stellar configuration of the Phalgunis, when you look at the Purva Phalguni and Uttara Phalguni, the overall picture and symbol, the Purva Phalguni is the first part of a marriage bed, then Uttara Phalguni is the second part of the marriage bed. Hence, there's an emphasis on conjugal life and its associated desires and pleasures. The native will enter into a happy ever after marriage with their dearly beloved, unless, of course, the chart indicates marital difficulties. If this is the case, then happy ever after may instead be one after the other, and might lack any deep feeling of meaning. Especially, again, the nodes can bring out this sort of consciousness, but anybody with difficult afflictions on a load-bearing part of the chart will probably experience the pain of never fully bonding deeply and firmly with a love partner. Such was the case with somebody named Zsa Gabor, who had their rising sign. The point of the ascendant was in Uttara Phalguni. Zsa Gabor acquired a reputation for serial matrimony. In all, she was married 9 times. Wow. Interesting. I'd like to know what her ascendant lord is, but it doesn't see it here. Now, the native reaps the wealth of Bhaga, which is meaning that they are the recipient of a generous dowry, when there's an emphasis in Bhaga, usually. Now, this is interesting, this little point here. If the 7th Bhavesha is implicated, then the native spouse is the one who is the benefactor of such privileges and luxuries. So this just goes to show how Vedic astrology often thinks, and it's very interesting to think about. I mentioned, for example, let's take a Cancer rising. The Bhavesha is the house lord. So let's take a Cancer rising. That means we would have Capricorn on the 7th cusp. Therefore, Saturn is the 7th Bhavesha. The house lord is what Bhavesha means. So we take the 7th lord, which is Saturn for Cancer rising, and we put Saturn in Uttara Phalguni. What we see is that the native's partner is the one who is going to receive these privileges and luxuries of a dowry, especially, again, if the 7th lord is well placed. Because what we see is that the psyche of our... Okay? Oh, no. I'm just going to give this a moment. Is everybody here? We're all together. We're good. Good. Sorry about that little stop there, folks. It's frustrating when it happens. But, again, if we have the 7th lord falling into Uttara Ashada, the 7th lord in our chart is going to show our partner, our spouse, right? So if our 7th lord, if a person's 7th lord is well placed, if it has delight, then our partner is going to receive what is implicated in the nakshatra, if our 7th lord is there. If the 7th lord, in this case Cancer rising, Saturn falls into, if Saturn falls into Uttara Phalguni and it's not getting what it needs to receive, then our partner will not experience the dowry, not experience what she wants to give in the marriage and wants to receive. The feminine aspect of things would be disrupted, whether you're a man or a woman. If you're a woman and your 7th lord falls in Uttara Phalguni, your man will not receive the proper dowry from you if there's afflictions to the 7th lord, right? This is how we have to read these sorts of things. It's an interesting little take on how Vedic consciousness works. isn't it? I gotta fix what's going on with my computer, it seems. Yeah, that's part of my reality right now. So, no big deal, folks. Let's finish what we can of this nakshatra reading. And then we are just going to move on with our lives. And hopefully this is going to actually save on YouTube. So, the Phalgunis imbue a sense of grand destiny. Yeah, I don't know why I'm still alive. Toxica. But it seems it's almost like a browser issue. I have no connection on my browser, but I have internet elsewhere. So, whatever. Thank you, Toxica. So let's finish up our discussion on the Phalgunis. The Phalgunis imbue a sense of grand destiny that is often tied to a personal relationship like a marriage. You know, Sati is destined from an early age to marry Shiva, which is given precedence in the story of the Phalgunis. Now, this could also relate to a business partnership. Now, don't be surprised if that relationship involves an outlandish character or someone from a very different background. When you have an emphasis of partnerships inside the Phalgunis, there is really the marriage of two different things. So any person with an emphasis of planets in the Phalgunis is probably going to be doing a marriage of possibly two very different people, just like how Shiva is very different from Sita. Family members in the native's life may not first approve of the native's choice in partners, just as Sati's father disowns his son-in-law, who is, of course, Shiva. So all this suggests that creating viable business or personal partner relationships takes a few tries, perhaps, with the person with the Phalguni emphasis. And it might even be several tries with the same person. Now, under the Phalgunis, Bhaga chaperones Surya to Soma's abode. Remember, this is the marriage of Surya, the sun's daughter, with Soma. Bhaga chaperones them to where Surya and Soma plan on building a life and a family together in the Phalgunis. The home becomes a place of emotional security and familial enjoyment for the person with Uttara Phalguni. The native is extremely adept at matchmaking. The ability to bring the right people and resources together is second nature to this person. This talent could perhaps launch the native into a career as a human resource recruiter, an investment banker, or a real estate broker. Recall that Purva Phalguni is ruled by Aryaman, the devata of contracts. So other vocations may include this of a contract attorney, notary, or contract negotiator. That's particularly with Purva Phalguni. Now, what's more unique to Uttara Phalguni is a peculiar attitude that develops towards money, especially when the nakshatra is afflicted. So remember that Bhaga is blinded in Vedic and post-Vedic literature, the Puranas, etc. The character of Bhaga is blind, which has some interesting metaphorical things going on there. It's suggestive of the proverb of blind fortune. It's one who's blind to their own good fortune. It's hard to see when you have your own good things going on, and it's easy to take for granted or abuse the good fortune that you receive in your life. It's like somebody who has what they need and want, but can't appreciate it. This is afflictions in Uttara Phalguni. So the native may spend lavishly on desired possessions or give indiscriminately to others. If all else bodes well in the chart, the native is instead extremely philanthropic, donating time and money generously to a worthy cause. That's if things are looking well with things related to Uttara Phalguni. Now, lastly, on a physical level, if afflicted, Uttara Phalguni may give health issues related to the eyes and vision, because Bhaga's eyes were poked out when glancing at the sacrificial offering in the old Vedic story. So there might actually be vision troubles for someone with an emphasis of Uttara Phalguni in their chart. Now, for some reason, my internet is back to not being so weak. And it looks like we are in the flow and that our video has stayed on, and that's amazing. So I'm glad I persevered. Thank you, Toxica, for encouraging me to persevere. I feel like I couldn't have done it without you. And for everybody for watching, it's been a little bit of a long video with some technical malfunctions, but you guys all hung out with me, and I appreciate it. My name is Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. This has been our reading discussing the nature of the Uttara Phalguni native. Please stay in touch. Let me know in the comments if this worked out okay. Let me know if the technical distractions were too distracting. I'd rather hear it than to be blind to it. And I appreciate everybody for watching this. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Tell your friends. The nakshatras are a very important part of astrology. Let's all dig into it together and figure it out. Figure out where the placements are. Feel out what our placements are so we can narrow down for future researchers of the nakshatras who will make use of them as time goes on. I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching.